Hello, hello. What is going on? Can everyone mute really quick? Sorry, I got a little bit of an echo. All right, cool. What's going on, guys? Happy Friday. We made it to the weekend. We are continuing our Generation Panel series that we started on FHL. We've already spoken to millennials and Gen X, but tonight we are talking to Gen Z. So first, we're going to start off with letting everybody introduce themselves. Let's go ahead and go around the panel. Let's go ahead and start with Mo.
Hey everyone, I'm Mo. You can find me at Mo's Frame. I'm just another member of the most depressed and most pissed off generation.
All right, Ruthie.
Hi, I'm Ruthie. I'm at It's Me Ruthie on Twitter, and I'd have to second Mo on that.
And Glory.
Hi, I'm Glory. I'm that, but I also co-host Slow News Day, which is a part of the MCSC network, and I also appear frequently on the Anonymous Bites Back program. And yeah, I'm an independent activist in many spheres. So yeah.
Awesome. All right, guys. So I want to start this off with you're a part of Gen Z, you're Zoomers. And I know that people have said a lot of things about your generation. I asked this question to Gen X and millennials as well. And I want to put this question out to the panel. What are some of the things that you've heard, some of the criticisms that you've heard about your generation that you feel is not fair?
Well, one of the things that I heard from the first time I got politically involved was that we are too angry. I always hear that from everyone, people who are older than me, and they are a little more to the right of me, liberals, conservatives. And of course, I'm angry. I feel like at this point, if you're not angry, you're actively choosing to be ignoring reality. Because whenever they need votes, whenever they need stuff get done, they're the youth are the future of our country. And then what future are they talking about? Because the cost of living keeps going way up when our incomes stay steady. With the global warming getting worse and worse, and the Democrats who are supposed to be, the party of climate change, doing basically nothing. But by the way, there was a study Associated Press showed that this year we're going to have more drilling permits since we've had from 2008. So more than Trump. So it feels like the future keeps getting more and more bleak for us. There is uncertainty as far as income, housing. I know millennials are less likely to own a house than any other generation, and our generation is supposed to, follow them. So of course I'm angry. My anger is justified, but to the people who tell me that I'm too angry, I just have to say that their ignorance is not justified.
Well said. Ruth Ann?
I would have to say I hear entitlement a lot. That word I feel like is thrown around. We just heard Joe Manchin say it from the back of his yacht, that he doesn't want people to become entitled. And when I hear people say that our generation is entitled, I think, why aren't we entitled to a world where our planet isn't dying? Aren't we entitled to clean water or to jobs that allow us to support families, or the option to go to school and not be over $100,000 in debt as young adults? The world that we have right now is depressing. I'm 22 years old. I don't remember before 9/11. I don't remember before the economy was always questionable. I've lived through 2 economic crashes. And I think entitlement is just such a slap in the face at this point.
Yeah, one thing I'd say that's really frustrating is that our anger and kind of our desire to, change the system, or in some cases completely upend it and abolish it, is attributed to the fact that we're young and naive and we don't have enough life experience, which I mean even though I definitely don't have the same life experiences as everyone else on this panel, or an older person I might be having, a conversation with, I still have a fair amount of life experience. And, just because you have more years doesn't mean that disqualifies, our passion or our anger. It's like, because that's something that I've gotten a lot. It's just like, oh yeah, well, you're young, you need to live more. Like, take a couple years and live more and come back, and then maybe you'll understand where I'm coming from. It's like, oh, so you just want me to walk away, let the world crumble some more, and then come back and be a bootlicker? Like, nah, that's not happening. So yeah, I'd say that's the criticism that I'm most frustrated with.
I hear you. Eric Gray said the life experience argument is trash. It's more about perspective above anything else. I agree. I want to talk to you guys about climate change, because this is something that we've seen both administrations, Trump and Biden's administrations, back down on. Joe Biden is now saying that, excuse me one second. Oh, whoops, I hit the wrong thing. Joe Biden is now saying that, so in reference to climate change, that was a part of the infrastructure bill. Actually, they wanted to research it, which they've already done. I don't know why you need more research on climate change. I think it's ridiculous. They're just stalling. How do you feel knowing that we have a president? It's not Trump anymore. Trump was a climate change denier, but we have a president who says that climate change is real, but he's also okay with fracking. And now they're taking the climate change portion of that bill off of that bill, like out of that bill. How do you guys feel about climate change? Because when I think about who's going to be the most affected, millennials, we may have maybe affected a little bit, but I feel like it's going to impact Gen Z more. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the Democrats that now basically have all power, they aren't doing anything. Trump, it's basically, if I had to make it would be like if a house is on fire, Trump would be the one who's saying, no, the house is not on fire. And then the Democrats would just be trying to put out the fire with like maybe half a glass of water. It's like the Paris Accord is not enough. Nothing they are doing is remotely enough. And what they are doing is trying to put the burden, I feel like, on the working class too. I don't remember exactly what it was, but California Governor Gavin Newsom, I think he banned like something like electric leaf blowers or something. And then he's signing like dozens of new drilling permits in California. I'm like, okay, so if climate change was really an issue to him, like the two are not even like remotely on the same level. And honestly, like even when I was younger, I didn't think we would see the immediate effects of climate change this soon. Like I didn't think by the time I was in my 20s it would be this bad. So that's another thing why the future is so like uncertain and dark to me too.
Ruthie?
Again, just the climate anxiety is unbelievable, because it's not just the natural disasters and the climate immigration that's going to come. It's the loss of food. We won't be able to feed all of ourselves. There's not going to be enough water for us all. And we have no one talking about like how we're going to solve these problems. We're like, I don't know what we're doing in Washington. I don't know what we're spending millions of dollars to send those people there to do. And the Democrats are negotiating down with themselves. It's so frustrating.
I mean, I'd say I'm not entirely surprised, unfortunately, to see Biden parroting these points of like, yeah, I believe the science, because I mean, he's getting a full talking points handbook handed to him by the World Economic Forum, which parrots the exact same bullshit about, oh, we need sustainable technology. We need smart technology, more electric vehicles, a carbon tax, and this whole language of, sustainability and believing in climate change, while still occupying the global south, pillaging the land and eventually the oceans, and eventually possibly even parts of space too. So it really doesn't come as a surprise to me. But I mean, yeah, just echoing everything else that my fellow panelists have said, like, we're really going to feel the effects, especially especially people in parts of the global south that live in more coastal areas, like the people that would live in atolls or around mangroves and depend on fishing as part of a lifestyle. Like, they're going to be incredibly adversely impacted by something like rising sea levels and how we're essentially going to pillage our oceans as well via something like deep sea mining for the purpose of more electric vehicle batteries. I mean, it's all like they're cloaking their policies that are just continuing the same exact destruction of the environment with a bunch of like soft sustainability language that's already handed to them by the same people who already destroyed the world. So
I want to mention something here that Jamie pointed out because this is important. Jamie said we knew climate change was bad in the 90s and we did nothing. And I have to agree with that because I remember even when I was in elementary school, um, back then I think it was called global warming. I think they changed the name and I forget why. But I remember we had Earth Day at school and we had like Earth Day t-shirts and everything. And they told us about the importance of recycling. And they told us about how, eventually the water would rise. They told us those things like when I was a kid. So it's really funny to me that now you have so many people saying that climate change is a hoax, that it's not real. I'm like, no, dude, they were talking to us about this back in the 90s. They just called it something different. How many of you live on the coast? Glory?
yeah, I lived my entire life in between Miami-Dade and Broward County, and where my family lives back in Broward right now is like right next to the Everglades, which is a big swamp in South Florida. And right now I currently go to school in Los Angeles, like 5 minutes away from the beach. So yeah, pretty coastal. I like being coastal as well, so kind of spoiled that way.
Ruthie, did you say you lived in the coast too?
I went to school in coastal New Hampshire for a while, and I remember taking a class on environmental science where they took us to a community in Portsmouth that was already seeing like foundations being ruined by rising tides, super tides.
So you mentioned New England. So something I've been noticing here as well, there seems to be more and more incidents of sharks on the
Yeah.
Cape, on
Yes.
Cape Cod, for those who don't know. Like keep in mind, we're no longer in summer. I mean, it's fall now, and this is it's still happening. I think it started to become a problem about 2 years ago, and they're seeing more and more sharks. And that also, I think, is because of climate change, because they're coming closer and closer, like inland.
I'm in Maine now, and that's happening in Portland also, as far north as Maine.
So there we go. Greg says, pretty sure it was Republicans that changed the term to climate change to make it sound like a non-issue. Interesting. Interesting. How many of you recycle? If you can. Okay. So one of the things that I found out recently in reference to recycling is that recycling does help, but it's very little in reference to how much the military industrial complex pollutes the earth. Planes, like I've said this before, we really need like high speed transportation in this country. We don't have it. They have it in Europe. We're way behind on infrastructure. When you think about those things, when you think about the military industrial complex, if we don't get a handle on that, what do you think is your future here in this country?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like I said, what they try to do is they try to put the burden of these issues that they are creating on us, like recycling. But then, like you said, the military industrial complex, they are the ones who are contributing the most by far to this crisis, which is what it is. But like I said, like if we want to see a future at all, there's got to be some big changes like right away. And to be honest, I'm not sure if we're going to see that. I don't want to sound like a downer, but that's just me being honest. Because they are not going to give up all this stuff that they're doing. I mean, they are in the pocket of fossil fuels, and I'm not sure if you're going to see a good change, at least anytime soon.
Ruthie?
Well, the US military is the single largest contributor to greenhouse gases on the planet, and the US spends $11 billion a day to maintain the Pentagon. Imagine if we spent half of that on combating climate change. I don't know. Like, we're never going to, we need to take down the military industrial complex. That's the only way we can solve climate change. And I don't think that's going to happen when we just approved, what was it, $7.5 trillion military budget almost unanimously among Democrats and Republicans.
Mm-hmm. Glory?
So I apologize for cussing on this program, but I think plenty of our problems climate-wise will be solved when people stop being such imperialist cunts. Like Ruthie said, I mean, we need to abolish the military-industrial complex. It's like a phenomenal mysticism said, it's the largest polluter in the world. We don't need over 800 military bases. And the fact that this is never looked at as part of the solution to climate change and to the destruction of the environment just speaks to the agenda that they're trying to push of further occupying and pillaging nations. And I mean, even a lot of the sustainable technology that they're pushing, like electric vehicles, Elon Musk and them, where are they getting that lithium from? How are they mining that lithium? When they run out of land in Africa and South America and Afghanistan to pillage, they're going to go to the oceans and completely ruin the seabed. And this is all outlined by contracts given out by the International Seabed Authority itself. So, I mean, it's like, and you know, it's always like the large states, their puppet proxies in whatever region, in whatever, like their proxy leaders that they place in there, and billionaires and global elites that are pushing this agenda without including an abolishment of the military, that still somehow they manage to make like sustainability colonizing. When they can do that, that's how you know that they don't really care about actually solving the problem of climate change.
I agree 100%. I want to talk about technology because your generation is the one that I feel really got a handle on social media. I was late to that. As a millennial, I was pretty late to that. But I want to get your take on social media, you guys, because I've heard like pros and cons about social media. Do you feel that when you are engaging on these platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, do you feel that social media is more of a positive experience, a negative experience, or in between? And do you feel that social media can affect you sometimes?
I'd say definitely somewhere in between. The positives is, one of the big positives is, for example, just us gathering today. You know, I wouldn't have known a lot of my leftist friends if it wasn't for Twitter. It's got its downsides too. Like, for example, Gen Z is the most depressed generation, and one of the things that they say is contributing to that fact is social media. But the thing is, if you look further into that, I feel like a lot of it, rather than just being the simple fact that, you know, you're looking at Instagram or whatever and you feel depressed, is because we are getting a lot more news through social media as well. Another one of the factors that they said was contributing to Gen Z being the most depressed was all the news about global warming, about all the disasters that are happening around the world. And that wasn't available before, like we had phones, you know, Twitter, internet. So that's a negative that I think, live with, because it's important to stay informed, even though it's depressing. But it's definitely got both its positives and negatives. We just got to be able to use social media like Twitter the best as we can to organize for ourselves, to inform other people, and to get our messages across.
Ruthie?
Yeah, I grew up on the internet, I feel. So and overall, I feel it's definitely a good thing. I've made a lot of friends on Twitter and other platforms. And like Mo said, this panel is great. And like he said, you get a lot of news that from independent media that you wouldn't see if you're watching CNN, MSNBC, Fox, or corporations are controlling what you see and what to pay attention to. And looping back to something Glory said earlier about how a lot of people from older generations will tell us, you don't have life experience, you can't have opinions like this. I feel like social media has allowed us to have life experience from so many, like thousands, millions of people. We see their experiences and we feel that secondhand grief, and you want to do something. So that's why there's so many protests, young protesters, young activists, people getting involved politically, because they're seeing pain, they're seeing homeless people, they're seeing people starving, being laid off. Like, there are just so many problems in this country, and we can't cover it up anymore because people are connected.
Glory?
I mean, yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement. I mean, like we're like the meme generation, especially because like I remember being in like, middle school and like scrolling through like iFunny and Reddit and Rage Comics and all that good stuff. So and I'm also a huge fan of anime and sports, and like that segment of Twitter is pretty heated, I'm not gonna lie. But I mean, yeah, I definitely think that it has its negatives just because it's been co-opted by like a lot of these influencers and award-winning activists that that use it to try and like influence people for another more insidious agenda. But I mean, like, even though I'm against big tech, I recognize like where the social media itself has its positives, like you guys said, in just like being able to connect people. Like they're like, I wouldn't be an independent media if it weren't for social media. Like I wouldn't even be as involved in activism if it weren't for being able to connect with people from social media, like being able to do an Assange protest in LA at the same time that like there's an Assange protest happening in Washington, D.C. and Poland and London all the time. And like being able to connect with those people that way, I think that's really cool. And, I think there's definitely like encrypted alternatives to social media as well that can be helpful for like the activist portion of social media, but like Telegram, etc. But even then, like I still think overall, honestly, social media is like a plus when you can, as long as you can use it, and even if it's just to like, have some fun and shitpost all day.
Colin, thanks so much for the super chat. I have a lot of hope in you guys. Your generation will not tolerate any BS. It sucks what previous generations have passed on to you. I'm sorry. Thanks so much for the super chat, Colin. I have to ask you guys, how many of you were on social media in high school? Oh my gosh.
Middle school.
Oh my gosh. I could not imagine.
13.
Whoa.
I think I was 15.
15?
Yeah, 15 when I first joined Twitter. And then I think that same year I made an Instagram too.
Wow. Mo?
Yeah, I think I was 15, 16, high school, yeah.
Oh my God.
I had an account on iFunny though when I was like 11 or 12, but but that's kind of dead now.
I'm just like remembering high school and what high school was like. And I'm just thinking like, oh my God, if we had social media back then, oh my goodness. Cause like back then, like if you did something, if you had a disagreement with someone or whatever, it just was what it was, right? It was like word of mouth or whatever, that kind of thing. But now it's like, if you do that, it's all over social media. And that's why I'm just like, oh my God, I couldn't imagine what that would have been like back then. Even like being in college, like I think about some of the like silly things me and my friends did in college. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad we were not on social media. So yeah, that's really interesting. I want to know, how do you guys feel when it comes to social media? Do you feel that those platforms have a responsibility to control the content?
That's a tough question. I'm against censorship, honestly, of any kind, to be honest, because I feel like the more Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, the more they take control, the less comfortable I feel. I feel like, they're kind of going against us, even if it's someone I don't like. For example, Trump getting banned on Twitter. I'll be honest, like maybe the first day I was like, yay, and then the second I was like, okay, wait a second. If they can do that to the president, former president, then they can do that to literally anyone. They can just silence them. And that's one thing I'm completely against: censorship of any kind. I feel like social media should be free.
Ruthie?
I agree with Mo, and going off of that, when they do have control, I feel like they shouldn't be using all these algorithms that they know are like putting violent topics to the top because they're more engaging, and I don't know, they shouldn't control users, but I feel like the number of bots that are on like Twitter and Instagram is out of control, so maybe take some of those off, but not controlling the content of real people.
Glory?
Yeah. I'm wearing my fuck censorship shirt. So absolutely not. I don't think social media should have any role in regulating itself, especially when we see how big tech is so merged with the government and so intertwined with the government to the point where they're basically almost one and the same. So it would be like a situation where like the police commission is investigating the police or something like that. So I mean, yeah, and also just especially when, even though there are uses for stuff like Twitter, I mean, the owners of these social media platforms are some pretty horrible people, like, Zuckerberg and Twitter. Even though you have Jack, most of it is owned. I think the largest share is owned by a Saudi prince. So, yeah, no.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm anti-censorship as well. I think and Mo, you brought up a good point that when it happened to Trump in reference to Twitter, there was a part of you that's kind of like, oh, we finally don't have to hear from this dude again. Like, just someone just shut him up. But then there was the other side of it that they can come after anyone. If they did that to the president of the United States, they can come after anybody. So that's a good point to bring up. What issue would you guys say is most important to you and why?
I mean, there's a lot of issues. That's the good news for this panel. We're not going to run out of issues to talk about. The bad news is there's so many issues, there's no way we can cover them all in one podcast. I'm going to pick free college just because that's personal to me. There's stats that show that after adjusting inflation, the cost of a four-year college for our generation, Generation Z, is more than 2.5 times what it was for the boomer generation. And that's the cost of tuition, room, books, everything. And that's crazy. So then when you get these representatives who are, again, like there's only one millennial senator in the Senate, and most of the House, most of the Senate are boomers and silent generation. So obviously they're not going to care about making public colleges free or erasing student debt. And then another thing is, if, for example, they made free college available, a lot of people would be in college, a lot of people would be getting degrees. But the reason I feel like they won't do that, one of the biggest reasons is that's how they recruit people for the military too. Literally, most of the people young people especially, who join the military, they join just for college education. And the military literally just preys on poor people. There was a study, I forgot who it was done by, but they said that just on targeting Generation Z, the military spends around like 400 million on ads on social media alone. That's YouTube ads, Instagram, Twitter, and they're just like focusing fire on Generation Z because that's how they get people. That's how they get to recruit people for the military. So free college would be my issue. Yeah.
Yeah, that's those are good points that you bring up because I did a stream a while back talking about military recruitment, how they target like Gen Z generation. They do a lot of ads, and it's true. Like this is the reason why you don't see people in the House and the Senate really pushing for free college because that is one of the benefits of joining the military that you can go to college for free. So if they were to make college free here in the United States, then that would affect the military industrial complex. It's all connected. So you don't want someone like, or Joe Biden is not going to, I know he said he was for free community college, but then he kind of like backed away on that too. Like Joe Biden is not going to be for that because that affects the military industrial complex. And then if you have free college, then the military recruitment is going to decrease. And if that decreases, we really can't make excuses for giving the military more money. So it's all connected. Good points, Mo. Ruthie?
I would say nationalizing healthcare and Medicare for all is my biggest issue, especially after COVID-19. It was a mass disabling event. So many young people that got the disease and didn't die now have lifelong illnesses because of it, are permanently disabled. And healthcare bills bankrupt millions of families, tens of thousands of people. Millions of people still don't have insurance. And I think that's the biggest burden on so many people in the country.
Yeah, the healthcare situation it affects all of us, right? I mean, that every generation, that's funny because every panel we've had so far, that one has been the same for every panel. That one has come up. Glory?
So I knew this question was coming, and I always have a really, really, really hard time narrowing it down to a single issue. So I formulated an answer that's like incredibly broad. So I apologize for being a bit head ass about this. But basically, abolition of a capitalist national security state, which thrives off of a carceral system, creating political prisoners and suppressing dissent, and commodifying and surveilling nature and culture, really. So, yeah. And even then, like, as impossibly broad as that was, it doesn't even cover everything. And, like, I know you guys feel the same way. It's so hard to narrow it down.
How do you feel your generation feels about capitalism? Because I have seen like the students that I work with, they're in your age group. And most of them that I have spoken to are drawn more towards socialism. So how do you guys feel about how capitalism is viewed by your generation?
It's good to see like more and more of my generation turn away from capitalism, but it's nearly not enough. Capitalism is not, it's just the most evil, inhumane system possibly imaginable. Basically, our human lives don't matter under capitalism. We're just numbers, we're just stats. But the thing is, things have been so horrible that I see more and more of people my generation turning to socialism. One of my coworkers, who's actually not even my generation, he's a little older, I think he's millennial, but he's like this super religious dude who wanted to become like a priest at some point, and he's calling himself a socialist now, just because he's seeing how bad things are, you know. But yeah, I hope to see everyone turn away from capitalism. That's going to be like the basic point. This is not a system that's made for humans to thrive. Capitalism goes against everything that humanity should be about.
Ruthie?
I'd have to agree with everything that Mo says. And I feel like when I was in high school, I was always from a very small town, very conservative town, and I never heard opposing views to capitalism. If you heard the word socialism or communism, you kind of gasped like it was a swear. And once I got out of there, went to college, I realized that a lot of young people my age, do call themselves socialists and are against capitalism, just exploring other options, other economic theories, and it just makes me hopeful, somewhat hopeful.
Glory?
Yeah, I kind of have a pretty like similar experience with regards to, socialism and communism being so taboo, and that I grew up in South Florida around Gusano land. So, yeah, but like even then when I was like going into high school, I like going into later stages of high school and then going into college out in LA, I noticed that people were like a lot of people won't outwardly call themselves socialist or communist, but they will be significantly more averse to capitalism and significantly more sympathetic to socialism. So, yeah, I feel like that's where a lot of people in our generation are, especially when we see like how the system has completely failed and how it's all like falling down, and because of that, we're looking for alternatives because there's just such a dissatisfaction with the current state of the world as a result of this ongoing system that relies on just like on so much looting and hyper materialism and just like poisoning values and stuff. So yeah.
Colin just mentioned, I heard that MTV is rebooting MTV Cribs to counter against the socialist sentiment seen among Gen Z. Oh my God. So I remember MTV Cribs. I know, like, for my generation, millennials, capitalism was heavily promoted on cable television, especially MTV. MTV Cribs. I don't know. Have you guys seen that? Ever seen it before? So basically, it was basically like, how people do those house tour videos? It was like that, but it was celebrities. So celebrities would say, "Welcome to my crib," and "This is where the magic happens." Like, that was a common phrase they used to say on that. And like, that was like a really popular show. And Nick and I were just talking about this yesterday, that even the hip hop industry promoted capitalism to us when we were like in the 90s rap heavily promoted capitalism. You had to have this car, you had to have this type of jewelry, you had to get, this fancy house. Like, it was promoted through music videos. And that's really interesting because the way that hip hop started was not that way. When hip hop started, it was more about social issues, talking about things in the community, and then things changed. When you guys think about these things, like the things I just mentioned about how capitalism was promoted to my generation, can you think of ways that you feel capitalism has been promoted to Gen Z?
Well, I would say, first of all, that MTV Cribs show, it's both hilarious and scary, how far their propaganda is going. But I was going to actually continue a point Glory said, that most people, if you ask them, if you talk to them about day-to-day issues, they are against a lot of things that capitalism promotes, and they believe in a lot of socialist ideologies. They just don't know it yet, just because of how heavily propagandized this country is. So they basically blame all the bad things that is inherently just because of capitalism on socialism. And you see it like every day. They're like, "Oh, this is what our country is going to be like under socialism." And it's like, our country is like this under capitalism right now. They do that all the time. That thing pisses me off so much. But that's how Nick for Hampton Leftists says it all the time. America is the most propagandist country in the whole world, and it's not even close. It's crazy because, like I said, if you talk to everyday people, most of them don't identify themselves as leftists, but they believe that people should have, healthcare, that we shouldn't spend this much money on military. They believe this. They believe a lot of the time we do, but they just don't know it yet. That these are leftist ideologies, but it's just all propaganda. Yeah. And it's just really annoying how strong the propaganda is.
Ruthie?
Just thinking about how capitalism is like portrayed to our generation, like every time there's a new iPhone or something coming out, you got to have it, or all these Instagram influencers, they're sitting in their cars, or like I think there was a tweet a few months ago about how the private jets that they sit in aren't really real. They're sets that they go and take pictures at or something. I don't know. But just trying to look rich, because it's the goal to be rich, and that's the end all be all to a happy life. If you can make money, then you'll have everything. It doesn't matter who you have to exploit to get there.
Glory?
Yeah, I was gonna say what Ruthie was saying, like how Instagram influencers are like the most prominent version of like those hyper materialistic 90s rappers, where they would like, post in all their Gucci that they wore for like 20 minutes and all that kind of stuff. And you still have rappers like pushing all these designer brands and stuff. I think pop music might be like more and more of a part of it. Like I thought of that, that like 7 Rings song by Ariana Grande that was just talking about how much she loves stuff, like rich people stuff. I don't remember the song, but like for some reason it popped into my head because I was like, you know what? Pop music is pretty guilty of that too. So that was the answer that popped into my head. And then what was I gonna say? I was gonna say as well, I actually remember a lot of like MTV shows, not even necessarily because I watched them, but because I saw them parodied on the Boondocks. So I think, yeah. So yeah, I think that was like, at least for me and for a lot of people, that was kind of like a cornerstone, was like this parody and like response to like the hyper neoliberalism of like the Clinton Bush era. So I think that became big, but then it also had like a resurgence through all these Instagram influencers and such, and yeah. It's still pushed on us, definitely, I think. And I was going to say as well, there's like this whole notion of clout now, which is like, I'm doing this all for the clout. Like, I want a following. I want all these like Twitch subs. And it's like, oh, great. Here capitalism is coming back again. Here the hyper materialism comes back. One of the freaking 3 evils that MLK warned about. So great. Yeah.
I got a reference. I'm gonna come
real quick. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Mo.
Yeah, one thing that they do is they basically steal all of these ideas or brands or not brands, or these labels that we have, and then they promote it as capitalist propaganda. For example, what was it? Gay Pride Month, Black Lives Matter. All of these have been co-opted, and they're like, "Oh, buy this T-shirt that we have for Black Lives Matter," and it's like, what? Or like how they so like, what was it? I read an article about Rihanna having like sweatshops in India, and then like they go, okay, oh, that's girl power, she's so successful and everything. So they basically co-opt every one of these basically powerful statements that we have, like girl power. They target minorities and people who are hurting, to give you the image that if you buy their products and consume more, things will be somehow better. But in fact, you're contributing to things being worse when you're consuming these products.
That's very true. I'm glad you brought that up, because Nike is notorious for doing that.
I was going to say, I wanted to go off that as well, too, because that's really true. How like by like commodifying such powerful ideas and like tenets of our culture, like you're almost like sucking the power out of them, because it's like, these are causes that like mean a lot to us, and especially like these were causes that specifically were founded by by minorities, and to see the most prominent faces of them be Chalkus Garvey, aka Sean King, and his ilk. It really does speak to where capitalism leads us to commodify anything. And I apologize if I accidentally attract a mob to your channel, Sabby, but fuck Beyonce. Because she posed in a Tiffany's ad with a blood diamond, and people thought that was great because it was like, yeah, first Black woman to pose with the Tiffany's diamond. I'm like, that was mined by someone who probably lost their hand
Yep.
because of imperialism in South Africa. And like Tiffany's now is still perpetrating the same harmful mining practices, and we're just gonna celebrate that. Like that's where like that's essentially where this focus on like materialism and capitalism has led us to the point where we're celebrating wins within the system as opposed to actual liberation. And yeah.
Agreed. I gotta hold on. Hamza, the rappers from the South promoted it, not from New York. No, that's not true. Jay-Z heavily promoted capitalism. Even Nas at one point, he switched over to that. When he came out with that video, You Can Hate Me Now, he did that song with Puff Daddy. I know he's P. Diddy, but I know him as Puff. Puff Daddy heavily promoted capitalism. So it wasn't just rappers from the South. Rappers all over the country did it because it was marketable and it made money. I want to add to this. One of the things that's really popular right now, has been popular for, I guess, like the past 10 years, actually, is Real Housewives. That's another one that heavily promotes capitalism. And what people don't often realize is some of those women don't even own those homes. This is something that came out later on, that they were renting this house just for the show. So you have to be careful about what you watch on television and assuming that this is reality, when at the end of the day, when you know you're going to have a camera following you around everywhere you go, of course you're going to have on the most expensive stuff. Of course you're going to dress a certain way. Of course you're going to talk a certain way. So it's just something people need to be mindful of too, is some of those reality shows, because there's a lot of reality shows on TV that promote capitalism. So I want to make people aware of that as well. One more question for you guys is, what advice would you give to the younger generations coming behind you?
I'm going to give them the advice that I kind of have to give myself every day, and that's, you got to put class solidarity above all. This capitalist system, what it does, it systematically pits minorities and people who are suffering against each other. And it's really easy to fall into that trap, but conservatives who are working class or liberals who are working class, they are not our enemies. My suggestion would be, my advice would be to be that we got to be kind to ourselves, and we got to be kind to our comrades. We got to have the time and an ability to educate them and bring them to our side and have conversations with them. We got to save our rage and anger for the elite, for the ruling class, for the politicians who are owned by the elite, the 1%. I see a lot of that especially on social media, that people are just jumping at each other's throats over nothing. And I'm like, okay, you guys realize what you're doing is you're helping the 1%. This is like, they're watching us, and you're basically probably mocking us. So we gotta be mindful of that, and we gotta be kinder to each other. Mutual aid is something that we gotta be really mindful of. I know that's kind of a separate topic, but we just had a unsuccessful general strike attempt. We had one last year. I'm really glad FHL is doing the general strike summit. I feel like mutual aid has to be a big part of that. Another advice would be to just Google your local mutual aid networks and join them, because for us to have a successful general strike, we got to have a strong base of mutual aid.
Agreed. Ruthie?
I would say, before anything else, to not let everything you see on social media and all the big issues take away your youth as a young person in Generation Z, because it's a lot to take in every day. But like Mo said, it's not liberals or conservatives or the unvaccinated that are your enemies. It's the billionaires. And also, I would tell people my age to just kind of tune out from the politics of Washington. Don't give your money and don't give your time to Bernie Sanders, AOC, the squad. They're not going to help you. Like, we just keep getting disappointed by them over and over again. But I wouldn't tune out from all politics. I would get involved in local politics, because that's where you can actually make change and feel like you're making a difference.
Well said. Glory?
Yeah, I mean, echo the same thing, definitely, just in the sense that, like, you know, don't give your money to politicians, give it to mutual aid, you know, divest from the system. Don't keep legitimizing a system that's killing us. At the end of the day, you can help make more of a change by getting involved with your community and with helping out in these mutual aid networks. And then I'll also say as well, for more advice to, you know, like people our age and people even younger, is that because of the circumstances of our anger at the system and our youth, we kind of have an amazing energy that's like really never ending, and that can be really powerful and really be a major driver of change. And just don't let that get co-opted, because every time that one of these movements happen that is led by young people, immediately it gets looked at as an option to be used for someone else's agenda. Like, that's why so many people are using, like at the top at the World Economic Forum, are using sustainability language to try and drive their agenda to further occupy and pillage the global South, because they know that that attracts young people. That's why so many people are like putting these faces of, you know, TikTokers and Greta Thunberg out to try and push their agenda, because it's like billionaires behind some of these influencers, yet they hope that by shoving these influencers in our faces that they can get some of that youth energy, because, you know, it's a very powerful thing. So, you know, if just don't trust billionaires in general, don't trust global elites in general. They don't really have your best interest. That's just a good place to start. Yeah.
That's a good point. And I want to add something else to that, in reference to trying to attract Gen Z. One of the things that was done by the National Football League, they actually changed the way they do their halftime show during the Super Bowl to attract that demographic. When I was growing up, it used to be like the halftime show used to be like bands. Like there was Tom Petty, there was Prince. The Prince halftime show was, till this day, I think is one of the best ones. So many different types of genre music that you heard. If you pay close attention, the past 10 years, it has not been that way. We've seen Justin Timberlake, I think, at the Super Bowl twice now during the halftime show. We've seen Beyonce 3 times, I believe. I think Bruno Mars has been on there 3 times. Katy Perry. That is actually done on purpose. They started to change the type of music that they brought in because they wanted to attract that demographic, even people who are not into football. And what happens during the halftime show? There's ads, lots of ads around the Super Bowl. So again, it's promoting capitalism to get you to come out and spend your money. So thank you for bringing that up, Glory. Those you guys, like everything that you've had to say, very insightful. It's great to hear from Gen Z. Like I said, my students are in your age group. I don't really talk to them about politics though, because it's my job. So I have to be careful like what I say to them. But it's nice to hear from you guys. And before you go, can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, find me at Mozframe, MOZFRAME. And we have a few political groups where we are going to start promoting more leftist causes and mutual aid. We used to focus more on candidates. That's changed. We're going to focus on causes and mutual aid first. So if you want to, help us promote those causes, send me a DM on Twitter.
Awesome. Ruthie?
You can find me on Twitter. My @ is itsme_Ruthie. And yeah, that's where I am.
Glory?
You can find me on the ground and around. I'm on Slow News Day, which we have shows every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'm also on Anonymous Bites Back a Lot, which is Thursdays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And most importantly, coming up in the short term, you can find me on the ground at the CNN building in Hollywood this coming Wednesday, October 27th at 5 p.m. That is the first day of the appeal hearing in the Julian Assange extradition trial. So we'll in Los Angeles, I'll be doing a protest outside CNN there. And if you're anywhere in the SoCal area, please come through. And yeah. Oh, and I also have a Hive blog. If you go to Hive blog, I'm at Zero Eclipse with 2 E's at the end. And I write stuff on there. And I actually did an article about like the whole commodification of our issues, which is like, you know, why it was great to talk about it on here as well. And yeah. Twitter, of course, I'm on Twitter. Just search up Glory Jones and come up with the hashtag Free Assange next to it. Yeah.
Awesome. I want to highlight something really quick before we go, because it's important that I try to mention this as much as I can. But for those of you who are wondering how you can help with mutual aid, if you go to mutualaidhub.org, Quaker Socialist has highlighted this in the chat. This is a website of the United States and all the different mutual aid organizations in the US. And you may not think there's any in your area. I was actually surprised how many were in my area. So if you go to this website, there's a map. You can click on your town, your city, and you'll see different organizations that you can get involved with. If you don't want to financially donate to a mutual aid, you can offer to help. So you can go out and you can help pick up groceries for people. That's a big thing, especially started during like the pandemic. People need people who are immunocompromised. They need other people to deliver groceries for them. Instacart is expensive. If that's something that you can do, I highly recommend doing that. People need people to pick up their prescription medication. They can't go out and do that as well. So there's lots of different things that you can do for mutual aid. It's not just donating your money. Another thing that you can do is you can help support Rome's Tour for the Poor. Most of you, I think, know about this, but Rome is traveling across this country doing mutual aid, feeding and clothing homeless people. That's something that we can greatly support. We appreciate all the support we can get for that, because without you guys, like, we wouldn't be able to do that. Like, a lot of people have supported Rome, like, in that effort as well. One thing I do want to say, we are going to be having the General Strike Summit in November. Some of you may have already seen the flyer on Twitter. I do want to say, and this is something I believe we're going to talk about during that summit, this question has come up often. There is a difference between charities and mutual aid, and that's important for people to know. I've had my experience with charities in the past, and that's kind of how I found out that the money doesn't always go where they say it's going, or the percentage doesn't go where they say it's going. Charities are top-down organizations. Mutual aid is not that way. So we're going to go into more like discussion about that during the General Strike Summit, because I've realized that some people will put in the comments that they donate to charity, and we just want to like explain to you guys the differences between the two. So that's something to look forward to as well. Thank you so much, Gene. Rome has a big heart. Yes, he does. Absolutely. So yeah, I will be live again at 8 o'clock tonight over on my channel. I'm going to talk about Biden's town hall, which was horrific last night. I'm also going to talk about this back and forth beef that is going on between Brianna Joy Gray and Richie Torres. And what else did I have on there? I'm trying to remember. Oh, yes. Candace Owens is trying to pretend like she's anti-police now. So that should be interesting discussion. So you guys can check me there at 8 o'clock. Guys, thanks so much for coming on. This has been a great discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, guys.